Welcome to She Rebel Radio, the podcast for high-performing women leaders who want to unlearn conventional rules, leave prestigious careers, and launch businesses of significance. Each week, She Rebel Radio brings you insights and advice from women entrepreneurs who transformed their prestige prisons into daring entrepreneurial success stories. Now, here is your host, Lulu Nins.
Welcome to She Rebel Radio, episode 6, with founder, managing director and practicing solicitor of Cognitive Law Limited, Lucy Tarrant. And during this episode, we're going to be talking about why women are leading the way with changing the way that we work. So a massive welcome to Lucy. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. And thank you for having me on.
It's a pleasure. And I was thinking when I was preparing this today that we met at the Women in Business Excellence Awards last year. Yes.
We were the runner-up. I was really delighted in one of the legal categories, professional women, which was very, very flattering.
Yes, amazing. I was thinking that this morning because, I was runner-up for coach and mentor. So we were runners-up and we were mutually introduced, weren't we?
Yes, we were.
That needed to have a conversation and had some similarities in our backgrounds.
Yes, and we hit it off and we've been, sort of full of synergy ever since.
Yes, we have. Yeah, going for a coffee, bumping into each other at yoga class.
Yeah, and the rest is history.
It is, absolutely. So it's a real honour to have you on the show today and to share about cognitive law and how you've created such a different law firm. And I know that we kind of joked as well when we were changing things in our careers that we should have met then, but unfortunately that wasn't the case.
No, absolutely. Not unfortunately, we only started the firm 5 years ago and it was very much born out of necessity. They say that necessity is the mother of invention, and this law firm really epitomises that saying. I was a partner in a traditional law firm. I've been a qualified solicitor for over 20 years, but about 6 years ago now, I realised that I couldn't maintain the pace of my career as I wanted it to be and maintain my family life. So that in a nutshell is where it was born, a flexibly working environment for professionals who still want to focus on their career but don't want to do it sat at a desk in an office 9 to 5 every day.
Absolutely. And as you said, maintaining the pace and the expectations, would you say, comes into that of what's expected?
Absolutely. I never wanted to compromise my career. I've got a 15-year-old daughter and I went back to work full-time when she was 6 months old. I never had any intention of not continuing my career. But after a few years, and particularly when I was a single mum, I struggled to find time for everything. And there was going to be a compromise somewhere. It was either going to be my sanity, my child, or my career. But I didn't see why I should compromise any of those three. And it was working together with my former business partner that we came up with the idea of a law firm that was completely flexible. So it's literally work when, and how you want without compromising your career.
I love that. And as you said there, compromising either your career, your child or your sanity, and trying to decide which one of that is going to be compromised or you have to change things.
Absolutely. There was no reason for me to give up any of them. I'm pretty close to all of them, including my sanity. But but the traditional private practice law firm was not delivering for me. It's, as you know, Lulu, it's long hours, it's hard work. You get home, you're exhausted. And then for me, I had to flip into mummy mode and not compromise my daughter. And it's just, there aren't enough hours in the day if you add into that commuting and sitting at an office where you're not necessarily productive the whole time.
Yeah, I quite often joke that, so much of the traditional legal profession is like that certainly, as you know, I was a court advocate, that I wasn't actually treated as a human being. I was just a cognitive in the wheel of whatever process was being moved forward. And I think a lot of law firms can act in that way as well, that your human needs are not actually taken into account at all.
Absolutely. Like you say, I felt like a very small participant. I was actually a partner, so in theory I should have had a bigger role, but I never really felt my voice was being heard, and for a long time I felt that perhaps I was saying something that wasn't worth being heard, but that was simply because of the people who were supposed to be listening. Their demographic was wrong for me. So it wasn't a question of what I said was wrong. I was just saying it in the wrong place to the wrong people at the wrong time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember, as you know, I left, before partnership. It went to a male colleague of mine, and I felt like that actually no one was really interested in what potentially I had to say, even if I got there, because again, it was the wrong demographic for me. So I asked myself why I was striving for that position in the first place.
Oh, I think you got out at the perfect time. There's an awful lot of disillusioned partners, men and women, but a lot of disillusioned partners who think, why did I want this? Nobody's listening to me. I mean, I always felt like the gobby girl at the back of the class because I felt like I would say something and nobody really wanted to hear. But that was just because they're, as a firm, and this isn't just one particular firm, but a lot of traditional law firms, their trajectory is different from my own.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that, the gobby girl at the back. I in fact made a joke about that at company training once, that I was sitting at the back. This is why we would have got on, because we would have been at the back setting the world to rights.
Absolutely. And that's all it takes, isn't it? Is a few of us gobby girls to sort of put our money where our mouth is, and which is what I did 5 years ago. I just said, sod it. If I don't do it, no one's ever going to do it for me. I'm just going to have to do it and prove my point somehow.
Yeah, and do it your way. And I love the tagline for Cognitive Law Limited, which is modern thinking, traditional values. Can you tell me a bit about that?
I never wanted to move away from the fact that the legal profession is one of the oldest professions, and I love being a solicitor. That I know that's super nerdy, but it's what I worked really, really hard for, and it's what I love doing. So I wanted to keep the traditional element of that profession, but do it in a modern way, because I don't see as it has to be as old as the tradition, the way in which we deliver our services. So it was my interpretation of how can I deliver a traditional product in a much more up-to-date way for not just the clients, but for the people who are delivering the services as well.
I love that. Delivering a traditional product in a much more up-to-date way.
Absolutely. There's no reason for solicitors to still be sitting in their ivory towers waiting for clients to make an appointment to come and see them. That's not the way it works anymore. We're a service industry, and we have to recognise the fact that we are delivering a service in competition with lots of other legal services providers, and stepping out of the kind of anachronistic way of delivery, I thought, really did set us free. And then couple that with the fact that our solicitors work wherever, whenever, it was like the perfect storm of turning the tradition on its head.
Absolutely. And from what you said, where clients benefit massively because the service delivery is massively upgraded to them, and then the solicitors benefit as well.
Absolutely. It's in theory and in practice, it's a win-win, because a lot of our solicitors are working flexibly around their families or their hobbies or other pastimes. And so they are much better placed to respond quickly to clients and just fit the work in around working life instead of within the confines of the traditional 9 to 5.
Yeah, absolutely. And I battled 11 years of the traditional 9 to 5 and the out of hours, and we still had to be caught first thing in the morning.
Absolutely. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And you suffer and the client suffers. I mean, I'm sure you did an amazing job, but at what cost?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, a prosecutor said to me recently that, very good defence lawyers last around 6 years, and it's for that reason, because you're doing the 9 to 5 and all the outside, and there's no flexibility. Don't come into the office, don't do a trial the next day when you're on call the night before, which is just sensible.
Yeah, absolutely. But we don't always have the opportunity to work sensibly, because we're not always working to our own rules.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important now. It's about real sustainability in that we are working much longer as well. So it's no longer an option to burn yourself out
No.
10, 20 years when we're going to be working for longer. And it's really important to enjoy that work.
Absolutely. And it was never an option for me not to work. I went back to work, like I said already, when my daughter was 6 months old, because if I didn't work, then the mortgage didn't get paid. So it was never an option not to work. But what was an option was whether or not I enjoyed what I was doing and how I was doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to you saying, you know, delivering one of the most traditional products there are in terms of legal service in a modern way, as we know, women have only been permitted to be in the legal profession for 100 years. We saw that last year. Why do you think women are leading the way in creating businesses and delivering services differently to how we've done it before?
I think there's been a second wave of feminism, really, in as much as women now feel empowered to prove that they can do it their own way. So 100 years ago, women, after they were allowed to be admitted to the role, pretty much had to toe the line. It was a case of, well, thank God we've got this, let's just get on with it. But I think certainly over the last 10 years or so, women have said, actually, you know what, I am here, I'm not going anywhere, but I want to do it my way that fits in with the rest of my life, which is still dominated by the woman as the primary caregiver for children.
Yeah, it definitely is. And that women, you know, we're quite wired to multitask, so we want a way to be able to do that as well. It doesn't have to be all about the one thing and that be our sole focus and that our only role and identity.
Absolutely. And I think there was a period of time throughout the 80s where you were supposed to be a woman having it all. You could have the career, you could have the family. And I think that was a myth that was perpetuated for quite a while until we realised, actually, you know what, we might be super women, but we're still human beings. And I think that has led to a lot of women saying, no, hold on, that was a myth, that's a fallacy. We've actually got to do it slightly differently. We can't do it the way that the men always did it. We've got to do it our way.
And do you think that we have suffered and struggled with that perception that we have to do it the way that men do it? And I quite often say we've kind of squeezed ourselves to fit into quite a masculine system and structure that doesn't actually necessarily suit us at a root level.
Oh, completely. I think for a long time we've tried to be square pegs in round holes because that's what we were told we had to do in order to get on. And I always felt like a woman in a man's world. Whereas these days, having sort of shed that, I now just feel like a Lucy in a Lucy world.
Amazing. Lucy in the Lucy world.
Yeah.
Love it. So what do you think your biggest challenge was, you know, or has been in setting up Cognitive Law Limited and breaking out?
Well, obviously, the biggest challenge is taking the first step. Once you've done that, everything is a piece of cake, really. It's taking the plunge was the hardest thing. And I completely empathise with anybody or any solicitor who's still in an employed role thinking, I just can't cut loose and do it for myself. But taking the plunge, once you've done it, it's downhill all the way.
How long do you think you sat and waited before you took the plunge?
Well, I know I waited for 2 years because my former business partner approached me 2 years before I said yes. And I said no then because I wasn't ready and I wasn't confident enough. So it did take me 2 years to say yes. And I'm really glad he asked me again.
Amazing. Yeah, it's the same for me. Maybe that's the kind of pro rata time that we wait. It was for 2 years. I knew I had to change something and I was too scared to take that first step or plunge because I just didn't know what that looked like.
No, I think we're all, particularly you and I, we're intelligent, thoughtful women. And we know that we can't just do something at the drop of a hat. But after a while, I'm sure you found months and months of thinking, no, this just isn't working. The idea starts to ferment far more until you get to a critical point where you say, that's it, I'm ready now.
Yeah, and I think the fear of staying the same, I used to fast forward kind of 5 years' time and see what life looked like, and it scared me that the fear became of change, or fear of staying the same, I should say, became bigger than the fear of change.
Absolutely, and that's exactly where I was. The fear of failing in the new world was not as great as the fear of staying in the old world.
Yeah, definitely, certainly agree with that, and I love the way that you've put that. What would your advice be for other women who, are maybe at that 2-year point or earlier on, and they're really wanting to start something different to break the status quo? What would your advice be?
What helped me was to visualize what I wanted my future to look like, and with that, but in quite definite terms. So what it looked like and what I was going to have to do to achieve that in manageable bite-sized steps. So not a nebulous concept of me on a beach with a laptop. That's lovely, but that wasn't going to be the reality. So keeping it real and thinking about what you want, how much you've got to earn, and when are you going to work and where are you going to work, just sorting through the practicalities makes it far more achievable.
Yeah, and I love how you said there with the visualizing your future, because I think, and I certainly know I made that mistake in setting up my first business. I went down the very traditional lawyer, I'm going to put a business plan together, and this, rather than just actually, what do I really want?
Yeah. I think you have to say, what's it going to look like? And then what steps am I going to use to get there? Whereas, like you say, a lot of us just put something down on paper. I don't do that anymore. I have what I call an aspirations board, which sounds a little bit airy-fairy, but on it are pictures of why I'm doing what I'm doing and what I'm working towards. And they are things like a new paddleboard, or a camper van, or whatever it is that takes my fancy at the time. It's not a beach with a laptop on it. It's something more tangible and much more attainable.
Certainly. And what did you say you called yours?
An aspirations board.
Oh, I like that. I haven't heard that before. I call mine a vibration board, so that's even more airy-fairy.
Oh, I like the sound of that.
Absolutely. And I put things as well on there that I have already achieved as well. As part of that.
That's a good idea. I might try that and just show, because one thing I don't think I and possibly many other women are very good at, and that's acknowledging and recognizing and celebrating what you have achieved already.
Yes. And I think the more successful and accolades of success and achievements, even my mum says to me, I forget how many degrees you have. So yeah, when you've got those achievements, sometimes you can move on to the next one without actually really checking in with where you're at.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to do, and I think I might do that actually, to go back and put a different section on my aspirations board that says, look how far you've come.
Yeah, and it's at that point often when especially when you could be striving, looking forward to the next thing, that you can really appreciate how far.
Yeah.
So what is next for you and cognitive law?
Continued growth, which it doesn't sound from a business point of view very certain, does it? But I've been growing the firm quite organically, with solicitors who buy into the same ethos as me. So solicitors who are pretty much always have been in private practice and who for a variety of reasons want to step out of it. And that's been a slow process, handpicking those who had exactly the same dream as me to come along with me. But now is the time to step up the growth and to get the word out there and really start engaging more solicitors to build the movement of flexibility within the legal profession.
Yes, so those solicitors who share that ethos and those values that you have around flexibility in working.
Yeah, and it's actually a hard task. I think I was quite naive when we started out. I'm glad I was naive, because sometimes if you knew the hurdles and the problems ahead of you, you wouldn't even start. So I'm glad I was naive. But I thought it would be easier to get the word out there and attract the type of talent that we are looking for. And it's not been as easy as I had hoped.
Why do you think that might be, in terms of, again, is it perhaps because the law firm is still, a lot of the legal profession is still stuck in the past?
Completely. No, you're absolutely right. And I have never thought of myself as a risk taker. But now I realise that in comparison to a lot of solicitors, perhaps I am. And solicitors, as you will identify, are typically quite risk averse, hence us taking 2 years to take the plunge. And it's very difficult to start trying to change the mindset of something that has been done in the same way for the last X amount of 100 years.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that traditional trajectory, that path that is so familiar, even at the starting point, as we know, when you start studying, you know the path, and the way you run cognitive law is a different trajectory for someone outside of the traditional thinking.
Yeah, and so that is why it's been such a slow burn and such a slow conversion of people interested in joining us.
It's reaching the right people, isn't it? And I totally agree with you with the naivety. When I first started my first business, which was in the dating industry of all industries, I just thought, people would find us and they'd think it was amazing. And it's not always how it works.
No, it's not. And there is an element of, if you build them, they will come. And that's how I started off. Well, they do say that if you leap, a net will fall. And I did have to believe that, otherwise I wouldn't even have started it. But I was naive as to how slowly getting the message out there would be.
But I think also when you're ahead of the game, it takes people longer to see that is actually the way that the world and the world of work is going, and that women are leading the way with changing this up.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, like a lot of people, I also suffer slightly from imposter syndrome. And I think that has held me back from singing from the rooftops what we're offering. But I'm going through a period of change with that at the moment. And I'm starting to shed that imposter syndrome and build our message to shout it much louder now.
Amazing to hear. I was just preparing a training actually in terms of imposter syndrome, which I will share with you a really great reframe of that is, instead of it being imposter syndrome, is that it's just an experience that we all have, and it's about changing that experience. And I often say, as women, I don't think we lack confidence, and the imposter syndrome, I feel, is stronger for us because, as we've said, we're squeezing ourselves into a man's world. But now it's about tearing that up and really breaking out of that and changing our experience of imposter syndrome.
Yes, I think that's right. And that does take time and effort. And similar to you, it's something I'm actively working on.
Yeah, and you have to work on it, definitely. And I can't remember the name of the person, but I just thought it was a great reframe, because the syndrome almost sounds like there's something wrong, rather than it's just an experience that we all have and we can change that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we run very different businesses as a result of experiencing that, though, because a lot of my colleagues will say to me that it's a very different working environment because there is no or very little ego and arrogance. And I think that's the plus side of sometimes suffering from an imposter experience.
Yes, it is definitely a very strong plus side. No egos and agendas.
No, none at all.
Definitely. So if those lawyers, solicitors are listening to this who may feel that this is a right fit for them, or anybody else who wants to contact you at Cognitive Law Limited, where can we find you?
Well, you can find us online at cognitivelawlimited.com. lulu.com. You can always find me in the office on 0333 400 4499. On my mobile, which is permanently glued to me, which is 07710 717 606. You can follow me on Twitter at Lucy Legal, and any which way you like. I'm always open to being contacted by anyone.
So if we have any lawyers, solicitors, or anyone else who is listening and wants to contact you, Lucy, where can they find you?
Well, the first place I'd suggest is check out our website, which is cognitivelaw.com. There's a great Join Us page with a lot of information on it. You can also find me and the firm on LinkedIn. I have a Twitter handle, Lucy Legal, and I'm always trying to upload some reasonably interesting content onto that. Or just drop me an email at lucy.tarrant@cognitivelaw.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing and for joining us today and sharing your story.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Lulu.
Thanks for listening to She Rebel Radio, the podcast for high-performing women leaders who want to unlearn conventional rules, leave prestigious careers, and launch businesses of significance. She Rebel Radio is executive produced and hosted by women's advocate and coach Lulu Mims. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you never miss another episode. You can find Lulu Mims on Facebook and LinkedIn at Lulu Mims and on Instagram at LuluMims_biz. Until next week, keep rebelling against the rules and designing success your way.